Have you ever felt the irresistible call of the deep, urging you to explore its hidden mysteries? We can all agree that venturing into the great outdoors can be filled with excitement and unexpected surprises, especially for those who crave adventure. But what happens when you suddenly find yourself alone inside a tiny hole cut through the ice of a frozen lake? Or when a series of unforeseen events unfolds in an instant, putting your friends' lives on the line and turning a thrilling dive into a nightmare? This is the story of the three most tragic and gruesome diving disasters in human history: the Plura Cave tragedy and the heroic recovery. On February 6, 2014, a close-knit group of 5 passionate and highly skilled adventure divers set out to explore the mysterious and challenging depths of the Plura Cave system in Norway. Leading the expedition was 46-year-old Kai Kankinen. He was followed by 42-year-old Patrick Gronkvist, 40-year-old Yadi Hutanen, 33-year-old Vesa Rantanen, and the youngest member of the team, 34-year-old Yadiu. Each diver possessed impressive certification and specialized equipment for cave diving. While 4 of them had already explored the twisting passages of Plura Cave on previous trips, Yadiu was about to experience its secrets for the very first time. Even though this was his first dive in Plura, Yadiu was no novice. He had already explored underwater quarries and caves across Finland and beyond. Together, the 5 friends were united by their deep passion for the underwater world and were ready to plunge into the unknown. Their ambitious plan was to enter through a pond that led into the Plura Cave entrance and then navigate more than 6,680 feet, 2,036 meters, of underwater passages before emerging at the Steinuga Flagget Cave, also known as Plura Grotto. This remarkable cave system, located in Rana, Norway, plunges to depths of at least 443 feet, 135 meters, and holds the title of the deepest cave in northern Europe. Its intricate pathways were carved over countless years by the flowing Plura River through limestone, creating a stunning yet extremely perilous underwater maze. Undertaking such a journey is not for the faint of heart. The ice-cold water and the narrow, twisting tunnels make it dangerously easy for divers to lose their way in the silent, submerged darkness. But none of these dangers scared the determined team. The dive. In the chilly early hours of February 6, 2014, the 5 eager divers were fully prepared for their big adventure. They divided themselves into 2 teams. Kai, Vesa, and Yadiu formed the first group, while Patrick and Yadi made up the second. As Patrick and Yadi began cutting through the thick ice at the cave entrance using chainsaws, the first team carried their heavy gear toward the Steinuga Flagget Cave entrance, ready to begin their part of the journey. Patrick and Yadi kicked off the dive, moving swiftly through the water with the assistance of an underwater scooter. This clever device helped them conserve energy as they entered through the freshly cut hole in the ice. Beneath the frozen surface, they found themselves surrounded by crystal-clear water that was just 2 degrees Celsius. The plan was for the second team to enter the water 2 hours after Patrick and Yadi had started. This delay would allow any disturbance caused by the first team's movements to settle, creating safer and calmer conditions for the follow-up group. Meanwhile, Patrick and Yadi pressed deeper into the cave, powered by their underwater scooter. They were well-equipped with closed-circuit rebreathers, CCR, and backup systems. The rebreathers allowed them to recycle the oxygen they exhaled, significantly extending their time underwater. For added safety, they also carried spare rebreather units and open-circuit gas cylinders in case of emergencies. 2 hours later, Kai, Vesa, and Yadi began their own underwater journey, entering the frigid waters through the same pond used by the first group. At this point, Patrick and Yadi had already ventured deep into the cave, approaching its most profound depths of around 427 feet, 130 meters. At that moment, they decided to release their underwater scooter so Yadi could fully immerse himself in the breathtaking scenery of the cave for the first time. For Yadi, experiencing Plura Cave was exhilarating. He tried to share his excitement with Patrick, but his shouts were muffled by the mouthpiece of his rebreather, making communication almost impossible in the silent underwater world. Tragedy strikes. As they continued deeper, Patrick and Yadi found themselves closer to the Steinuga Flagget Cave exit than to the original pond entrance. While navigating a narrow, ascending passage after making a right turn, Patrick led the way and switched to his backup rebreather system. Upon completing the ascent, he suddenly noticed that Yadi's light was missing. Concerned, Patrick paused and waited, only to see Yadi H's light flickering in a clear distress signal, moving up and down in the darkness. Understanding the urgency, Patrick hurried back to help his friend. The narrow confines of the cave forced him to remove one of his large bailout cylinders and the scooter that was nearly blocking the passage at Yadi H's request. When Patrick finally reached Yadi H, he discovered that the line from Yadi H's scooter had become entangled under a massive rock. Despite Yadi H's attempts to communicate, it was only when Patrick noticed the scooter's predicament that Yadi H managed to dislodge it with force. Instead of continuing forward, Yadi H signaled that he needed open-circuit bailout gas, a clear sign he was in serious distress. At this critical moment, approximately 364 feet, 110 meters, below the surface, Patrick handed over the open-circuit bailout gas to his struggling friend. Yadi H took several breaths from it before attempting to switch back to his rebreather, repeating this process multiple times in a desperate effort to stabilize himself. It was then that Patrick realized Yadi H was no longer breathing properly. He had no regulator in his mouth. Acting swiftly, Patrick helped Yadi H by placing a regulator in his mouth and pressing the purge button to ensure he could breathe again. This quick thinking showcased the critical importance of teamwork in the face of underwater emergencies. However, in his attempt to clear the regulator and help Yadi breathe, Patrick pressed the purge button, releasing a strong burst of air. He meant only to assist, but tragically, this action caused Yadi H to inhale water. Devastatingly, Yadi H lost his life in that moment. The shock and sorrow of watching his close friend die right in front of him overwhelmed Patrick. Even though he was an experienced rescue diver accustomed to seeing the aftermath of accidents, the sight of his friend's lifeless body in such a remote and unforgiving place was profoundly traumatic. Knowing he needed to keep his composure to avoid becoming the second victim of the cave, Patrick fought hard to steady his nerves. Panic sets in. Facing the harsh reality that panic could be a lethal enemy in cave diving, Patrick found himself in a truly dire situation. With Yadi H's body now blocking the narrow passage, he could not backtrack to warn the second group about the tragedy that had just unfolded. A quick ascent was impossible due to the severe risk of decompression sickness. What was supposed to be a 5-hour dive now threatened to stretch into an 8 or 9-hour ordeal. Patrick had already shared much of his bailout oxygen with Yadi H, and with the oxygen cylinder still with his fallen friend, his options were dangerously limited. His only realistic choice was to press forward toward the Stynuga Floggett cave exit, hoping his remaining gas supply would last long enough. As Patrick navigated the perilous path ahead, he could not stop worrying about how the other divers would react when they encountered Yadi H's body. The uncertainty of whether they would all make it out safely weighed heavily on him, leaving him to wonder if he might end up as the sole survivor of their ill-fated expedition. Meanwhile, the second group, led by Vesa with a video camera mounted on his scooter, was completely unaware of the tragedy that had already occurred. Vesa, along with Kai and Yadi, had brought an unusually large supply of bailout cylinders. Some considered this overly cautious, warning that the extra tanks could restrict movement in the cave's tighter sections. Despite their concerns, Vesa insisted on carrying them, and Kai even offered to help transport one of the cylinders. Their journey became challenging when Vesa found himself stuck in a particularly narrow passage approximately 410 feet, 124 meters, into the cave. To squeeze through, he had to remove 2 of his cylinders. Complications continued when one of his fins became entangled with the guideline. In a tense moment, Vesa had to rely on Yadiu, who was right behind him, to free the entangled fin. This highlighted the critical importance of teamwork and remaining calm under pressure in cave diving. After freeing himself, Vesa realized that the initial delay had extended his dive time, forcing him to face numerous decompression stops in the freezing water, a prospect he dreaded. Pressing deeper into the cave, he suddenly encountered the lifeless body of Yadi H. Determinedly averting his gaze, Vesa carefully maneuvered around the grim sight and continued forward. As he advanced, he noticed a light drawing nearer. Vesa then met Yadiu, who slid past him, shouting the devastating news of Yadi H's death, but expressing his determination to keep moving forward. A short distance behind, Kai caught up with Yadiu and immediately sensed that something was terribly wrong. Kai tried to understand what Yadiu was saying, but Yadiu was moving erratically, clearly disturbed by the sight of Yadi H's body. His actions became increasingly frantic as he toggled between his bailout system and the closed-circuit rebreather. Despite Kai's attempts to calm him down and urge caution, the situation ended tragically when Yadiu also lost his life in the unforgiving depths of the cave. Left with no other choice, Kai pressed forward, unable to offer any help to his fallen companions. Moving past Yadiu's lifeless form, Kai encountered Vesa, who was fiercely struggling to bypass Yadiu's body. In a moment of desperation, Kai shouted to Vesa, urging him to turn back after learning of Yadiu's fate. However, Vesa hesitated, reluctant to face the long and difficult journey back to the pond entrance where their ordeal had begun. Alone and facing overwhelming uncertainty, Kai made the painful decision to turn back rather than wait for Vesa, whom he feared might succumb to panic and exhaustion. With Vasa's fate unknown and Patrick's whereabouts uncertain, Kai pushed onward, grappling with the grim possibility that he might not survive the unforgiving depths of the cave. As he ascended, Kai faced numerous challenges. Despite having 2 rebreathers, his air supply was rapidly dwindling. One of his bailout cylinders was unsuitable for the ascent. Ignoring repeated warnings from his dive computer, Kai chose a rapid ascent, prioritizing the urgency of reaching the surface over the risk of decompression sickness. Upon reaching the air chamber, located just 98 feet, 29 meters, from the entrance, Kai briefly considered conserving his remaining air but ultimately decided to press on, fully aware of how precarious his situation had become. With no rescue in sight, he continued toward the entrance, facing additional setbacks when his underwater scooter suddenly malfunctioned. Forced to rely on sheer physical effort to propel himself forward, Kai struggled through the darkness and freezing cold, knowing his survival depended entirely on reaching the surface before his air ran out. Meanwhile, Patrick continued his solitary ascent, his thoughts consumed by despair and worry for his friends. With limited battery power left in his scooter, he faced a difficult choice between staying warm and keeping his light on. Each option carried its own risks, adding to the heavy burden of his solitude in the cold, dark waters. Unaware that Vesa was behind him undergoing decompression stops, Patrick pressed forward, his mind filled with uncertainty about his own fate and the well-being of his loved ones waiting above ground. As the 3 surviving divers fought their way toward the cave's entrance, each battling exhaustion and dwindling oxygen supplies, their thoughts were filled with guilt and sorrow over their fallen friend Yadiu. Kai, struggling under the weight of his own guilt, pushed forward, skipping numerous decompression stops to save time and conserve air. Even after dropping some of his equipment to lighten his load, the journey took a heavy toll on him. His only solace was the hope of reaching the surface before his air completely ran out. Patrick continued his solitary ascent, his thoughts consumed by the fate of his friends and the long, grueling hours he had already spent in the cold, dark waters. As he neared the surface, a glimmer of relief washed over him when he finally encountered Vesa, who informed him that the others had decided to turn back. With renewed determination, Patrick pressed on and eventually emerged from the cave after an exhausting 8.5 hours, greeted by the darkness of the early morning. As Patrick and Vesa changed into dry clothes and waited at the Steinugafloget cave, Kai finally emerged from the alternate entrance near the pond, exhausted and completely alone. Confusion reigned as they reunited, with Kai initially mistaking them for locals. Together, they immediately alerted the Norwegian authorities to the tragic incident that had unfolded deep inside the cave. The news of the Finnish divers' deaths in Plura Cave sent shockwaves around the world, prompting a thorough investigation by police officers at the scene. Vesa, who was experiencing symptoms he believed to be decompression sickness, was rushed to a decompression chamber in Bergen for urgent medical attention. This underscored the grave risks inherent in cave diving and the critical importance of proper safety protocols. The ordeal in the depths of Plura Cave served as a sobering reminder of the extreme perils of underwater exploration and the profound consequences that can follow even the smallest misstep. As the surviving divers grappled with the aftermath of the tragedy, their harrowing tale highlighted the inherent dangers and uncertainties of venturing into the uncharted depths of the underwater world. The recovery. The tragic events in Plura Cave left an indelible mark on Patrick, Kai, and Vesa. Despite an official ban on further exploration, the 3 men felt compelled to take matters into their own hands. Determined to honor the memory of their lost friends and bring closure to their families, they embarked on a perilous mission to recover the bodies themselves. Despite the inherent risks and challenges, Patrick reached out to his extensive diving network and rallied support for the recovery operation. With a dedicated team of experienced divers by their side, they meticulously planned every aspect of the mission, leaving no room for error. Their preparations were rigorous, encompassing intense physical conditioning, mental fortitude, and extensive familiarization with the cave's complex layout. Equipped with specialized gear and a detailed strategy, they braved the treacherous passages of Plura Cave once again, following the same trail that Patrick and his friends had taken. The journey was fraught with both physical and emotional obstacles, but their unwavering determination propelled them forward. Battling against strong currents and murky waters, they persevered, driven by their deep commitment to bringing closure to the grieving families of the fallen divers. Finally, after weeks of careful preparation and grueling effort, the team reached the site where Yachty H and Yachty U lay. With reverence and solemnity, they carefully recovered the bodies, knowing they carried the hopes and prayers of the victims' loved ones back to the surface. The successful recovery of the bodies was a bittersweet victory. It brought a sense of closure to the grieving families while underscoring the profound bonds of friendship and camaraderie within the diving community. The bodies were transported back to their respective countries, allowing them to be laid to rest with dignity and respect. The Plura Cave tragedy served as a powerful reminder of the inherent risks of cave diving and the absolute necessity of safety protocols and thorough preparation. At the same time, it showcased the remarkable resilience and compassion of the diving community, united in their determination to honor the memory of their fallen comrades and ensure that their legacy lives on. The Zacatin Cave Tragedy. Speaking of the extreme risks of cave diving, on April 6, 1994, a legendary cave diver and explorer ventured into the Zacatin sinkhole for what he believed would be one of the deepest dives in history. Little did he know that things would take a tragic turn for the worse. Sheck Exley, an American cave diver, was born on April 1, 1949, and tragically passed away on April 6, 1994. In a unique and memorable event, Exley married fellow cave diver Mary Ellen Eckhoff while submerged in the Thunderhole Cave system on October 29, 1983, with the ceremony officiated by Henry Nicholson. Tragically, 11 years later, Exley lost his life at the age of 45 during an ambitious dive in Zacatin, northeast Mexico, in collaboration with fellow explorer Jim Bowden. Despite the lack of formal training and safety standards in the early days of cave diving, Sheck Exley became an undisputed expert and a towering figure in the community. In 1979, he authored the book Basic Cave Diving, a blueprint for survival, which is still regarded as the definitive guide for the sport, focusing heavily on safety and emergency procedures. Sheck's expertise was unmatched. By the age of 23, he had already logged over 100 cave dives, and by his mid-40s, he had completed more than 4,000 dives. Exley's influence extended far beyond cave diving into the realm of extreme deep scuba diving, where he constantly pushed the boundaries of human exploration. He also played a major role in standardizing safety equipment, most notably popularizing the octopus, a redundant second-stage diving regulator that is essential for rescue scenarios and gas sharing among divers during emergencies. His passion for diving deep made him an ultimate competitor, even though the risks associated with extreme depths increased dramatically. The deeper a diver goes, the more they face the crushing pressure of water, which can be extremely dangerous for those who are not fully prepared. Additionally, depth affects the body internally, leading to conditions like nitrogen narcosis and decompression sickness, which can strike suddenly and without warning. However, Sheck seemed to possess unique abilities that allowed him to withstand these challenges, making him exceptionally skilled at deep diving. Speaking of nitrogen narcosis, as divers descend deeper, nitrogen can build up in the bloodstream too quickly for the body to handle, leading to a condition known as nitrogen narcosis. This can make a person feel intoxicated, similar to being drunk, causing impairments such as hallucinations, dizziness, and poor decision-making, all of which are extremely dangerous, especially at great depths. To combat this, divers use gas mixtures with less nitrogen the deeper they go. However, Sheck seemed almost immune to nitrogen narcosis. While assisting two divers attempting a depth record in 1970, Sheck reached 465 feet before experiencing any effects of narcosis, unlike the other divers who tragically died due to it. Prominence in cave diving. Shek also achieved the remarkable feat of being the first person to die below 800 feet in technical scuba diving. He never experienced decompression sickness, also known as the bends, which occurs when nitrogen absorbed during descent floods back into the bloodstream too quickly, forming dangerous bubbles. These bubbles can be fatal if severe enough. Decompression stops during ascent help release nitrogen slowly, preventing bubble formation. Shek's apparent immunity to these conditions gave him a significant advantage. By 1994, Shek held the record for the 3 deepest dives of all time, including a dive to 881 feet a few years earlier. However, he was determined to go even deeper. His friend and diving partner, Jim Bowden, told him about a cave called Zacaton, believed to have the deepest known sinkhole in the world. This revelation sparked Shek's desire to push his limits further. Zacaton Sinkhole. Zacaton is a thermal water-filled sinkhole located in the Zacaton system, a collection of unique karst features in Aldama municipality near the Sierra de Tamaulipas in Tamaulipas, Mexico. With a total depth of 1,112 feet, it ranks among the deepest water-filled sinkholes globally. Using an autonomous robot, the underwater portion of Zacaton has been measured at 1,047 feet deep, with a 66-foot difference between the cliff rim and the water surface, contributing to the overall depth. Among the 5 sinkholes in Rancho La Azafrosa, Zacaton is the only one with noticeable water flow. The name Zacaton comes from the free-floating islands of zacate grass that drift on the surface with the wind. Additionally, scrapings from the rock walls below the surface have revealed the presence of at least 3 new phyla of bacteria. In 1993, when Shek first saw Zacaton for himself, his enthusiasm soared. Despite usually being stoic and mild-mannered, he exhibited childlike excitement after resurfacing from his first dive there. Immediately, Shek and Jim began planning a dive that would take them to depths of 1,000 feet or more. Over the next year, they meticulously discussed and examined every detail, ensuring perfection. This included calculating the exact gas blend and amount needed, as well as conducting numerous practice dives to prepare mentally and physically. Their thorough planning resulted in a solid and specific plan. They assembled a support team, including divers and Kristovich and Marcus Gary, along with Shek's wife Mary Ellen and Jim's wife Karen. Rather than entering Zacaton directly due to the surrounding rock faces, they planned to enter from a nearby spring and swim through a 600-foot tunnel connecting the 2 points. Weighted guide ropes were set up in the cenote for their descent and ascent. Jim would descend first, followed by Shek after 10 seconds, to avoid any collisions. Their plan involved a rapid descent at a rate of 100 feet per minute, aiming to touch the bottom quickly and begin ascending immediately to minimize decompression time. Despite using precise gas mixtures across over 30 tanks, including nitrogen, oxygen, and helium, for rapid decompression, the return trip to the surface would still require approximately 10 hours and 50 stops. Despite being physically fit, Shek, now 45, contemplated his future in diving throughout the planning process. He realized the invincibility of his youth was fading, a fact brought to his attention during a dive at Bushman's Hole in South Africa. Nevertheless, they set the dive date for April 6, 1994, just 6 days after Shek's 45th birthday, coinciding with his spring break from teaching. The dive into Zacaton Sinkhole. On April 6, 1994, Shek Exley and his diving partner, Jim Bowden, embarked on the El Protector de Buceo Profundo project at the Zacaton Sinkhole in Mexico. They began by starting a new dive line and swimming through a 600-foot passageway to reach the sinkhole. After completing their equipment check, they signaled their readiness with a nod to each other and separated to follow their respective descent lines. Jim descended first, followed shortly by Shek, who remained about 25 to 30 feet apart but connected by guidelines. They carefully monitored these guidelines as they descended, fully understanding the potential consequences of any mistakes. After descending for some time, they exchanged nods to confirm their progress, prompting Jim to continue his descent. He paused briefly at around 10 feet before entering a free fall. During the descent, both divers maintained a deliberate breathing pattern, taking slow, deep breaths to optimize gas consumption and prevent carbon dioxide buildup. They understood the importance of maintaining this pattern, as any alteration could affect their calculations and lead to complications. Their descent was planned to last between 10 to 12 minutes, during which they remained vigilant and focused on maintaining their breathing rhythm to ensure a safe journey to their intended depth. To manage decompression and gas effectively, Jim planned a rapid descent with a rate of 100 feet per minute to 300 feet, then to 600 feet. However, he intended to slow down when reaching around 750 to 800 feet due to previous experiences with high-pressure nervous syndrome at similar depths in Bushman's Hole, South Africa. Both Jim and Sheck breathed from their air cylinders until reaching a depth of 290 feet. At this point, Sheck staged his air cylinder by fixing it to the line. Jim, on the other hand, utilized a small pony cylinder as his back-mounted cylinder for air supply. They later switched to Trimix, containing 10.5% oxygen, 50% helium, and the remainder nitrogen, suitable for deep dives from 290 to 580 feet. Their well-planned gas mixes ensured a safe dive. The encounter at 800 feet. The dive was going according to plan, but as Jim crossed the 800-foot mark, he saw a light shining in front of him. He could see Sheck's light far away. In the meantime, Sheck continued into the distance, and he was going at a faster rate than before. Usually, this rate of descent is so fast that it could lead to high-pressure nervous syndrome. At 700 feet, his body couldn't take it anymore and it started going into fits. His vision was obstructed by hundreds of small concentric circles with sparkling dots, and he started experiencing itching and stinging all over his body. This was high-pressure nervous syndrome brought about by several rapid compressions. The extreme pressure of his descent had affected his brain function, causing his neural circuits to run wild. At 750 feet, Sheck stopped to consider his options, which were to abort the descent or continue further down. He decided to continue his descent, but at a slower rate, exploring the unknown depths. When Sheck reached the bottom of the cave at around 860 feet, his body began shaking uncontrollably, likely due to the extreme depth and pressure. Despite this, he pressed on, albeit with impaired vision caused by high-pressure nervous syndrome. Despite his blurred vision, Sheck recognized the lunar-like landscape, covered in small rocks and nearly a foot of black sediment, confirming that he had reached an unexplored depth. Aware that a prolonged stay at such depths would require extensive decompression, resulting in additional hours underwater, Sheck decided to ascend. He inflated his buoyancy device and started rising. As he ascended, the symptoms of high-pressure nervous syndrome gradually subsided, providing him with relief. Meanwhile, Jim, at 900 feet, realized that he had consumed more air than anticipated, potentially complicating his ascent and highlighting the challenges of deep-water exploration. As Jim continued his ascent, he became increasingly concerned about potential regulator failure, which could have catastrophic consequences. To mitigate this risk, he inflated his buoyancy control device, halting his descent at 920 feet. He switched from his main tank to his backup tank at 450 feet to ensure a continuous air supply. However, when he attempted to use his backup tank, the regulator broke off forcefully, causing panic. Despite managing to reattach the regulator, Jim remained unsettled as it was no longer securely fastened. He had to manually open and close the valve with each breath, adding to the stress of the situation. Jim encountered around 8 minutes of decompression stops between 350 feet until reaching the next stage bottle. Upon reaching it, he switched to the staged air, relieved to have a functioning regulator. At 250 feet, Jim switched to another air tank and noticed that Sheck's descent line and stage bottles remained untouched, indicating that something was terribly wrong with his diving partner. Discovery and grief. As Jim continued his ascent for decompression, his heart sank at the realization that Sheck had not resurfaced. He tried to console himself with the hope that Sheck had descended far below and would soon emerge. However, he couldn't shake the concern and questioned why Sheck would risk diving so deep into such a dangerous sinkhole. Jim began his decompression ascent, a process that would take up to 9 hours. Meanwhile, Kristovich, their support diver, remained on the surface, monitoring the bubbles from the divers below. After about 18 minutes, Kristovich noticed that only Jim's bubbles were visible, indicating that Sheck's ascent had halted. Concerned, Kristovich exchanged glances with Jim's wife, Karen, before diving to meet him at the 47-minute mark. Upon reaching Jim, Kristovich was relieved to find him safe but was shocked to see Sheck's equipment untouched, suggesting that he had not surfaced as expected. As Mary Ellen, Sheck's wife, watched from the cliff, Unaware of the unfolding crisis, she eventually joined Jim's wife, Karen, to assess the situation. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Mary Ellen prepared herself by taking an extra stage bottle and plunged into the water to find her husband. Upon reaching Jim and Kristovich, Mary Ellen's fears began to materialize as she realized the severity of the situation. The tension and apprehension grew as they continued their search for Shek, hoping for a positive outcome. Heartbreaking loss. Mary Ellen swiftly communicated her plan to search for Shek's bubbles using a dive slate and descended to 250 feet, but unfortunately found no signs of him. Meanwhile, Jim's wife, distraught and crying, joined Mary Ellen at 150 feet as she ascended. Jim, realizing that Karen had ascended beyond the safe decompression depth, took control of her gauge, which indicated a depth of 278 feet. He held her down for more than 40 minutes of decompression, a somber and challenging period for both of them. Tragically, it was at the 60-foot stop that Jim learned of Shek's fate. The remaining decompression period was a painful reminder of their loss, as they grappled with the reality that Shek hadn't made it out alive. Shek, aged 45, had met his end during the dive, making Jim the first diver to successfully surpass the 900-foot mark on self-contained scuba air, with a record depth of 925 feet, surpassing Shek's previous record of 881 feet. Upon returning to the surface, Jim was treated for his physical ailments, including shoulder pain with oxygen, corticosteroids, and hydration. On April 7, 1994, Kristovich and the support divers returned to the sinkhole to recover equipment from both guidelines. Shek's equipment was found to be heavy, including the steel tanks, necessitating the use of a pulley system for recovery. After 2 days of effort, Shek's body surfaced, with lines tied around his arms and the valve of his mounted bottles at his side. While some of his equipment remained intact, including his BC with gas and a working inflator, his wrist-mounted dive computer indicated a maximum depth of 904 feet, suggesting that the incident occurred 9 minutes into the dive. The gases in his cylinder were found to have an accurate mix, and the autopsy, though challenging due to the effects of immediate decompression and the delay in conducting the post-mortem analysis, yielded no definitive cause of death. Finally, we have the fatal tragedy of Yuri Lipsky. Enter the blue hole, one of the deadliest diving spots on the planet. A blue hole is essentially a natural underwater sinkhole. Back in the ice ages, when sea levels were lower, caves and sinkholes formed on dry land. Then, rain and salty seawater did their work, eroding the caves and creating these circular holes. The outer edges are made of rock that doesn't dissolve easily, forming a stable rim. The Great Blue Hole in Belize is a prime example. The edge is just 33 feet deep, but it plunges dramatically to 407 feet in a single drop. This depth difference creates a stunning color contrast: tropical blue on the edges and deep, dark blue in the middle. Now here's the cool, albeit eerie, part. The water circulation in these holes is often poor, especially in the deep zones. Some of them lack oxygen at the bottom, making them feel like an alien world with minimal sea life. Despite these quirks, blue holes are popular diving spots. They usually lack strong currents, making them accessible and convenient. People are drawn to the mysterious allure, even if some spots have a bit of a sinister reputation. Right on the shore, there's a memorial for divers who lost their lives in the hole. Almost morbidly, potential divers check out these plaques before taking the plunge, hoping to avoid needing a recovery. The reality is that the recovered ones are just a small fraction of those down there. Due to the hole's size and depth, some people aren't found until much later, making recovery challenging due to decomposition. In a rather morbid twist, divers often capture videos during their blue hole dives. When reviewing these later, lost individuals' equipment occasionally surfaces, resting in the sand or rocks along the bottom. I know what you are asking yourself now. What are the potential reasons for the danger? The unique shape of the Dahab hole could be a factor. From the surface, the walls narrow like a funnel as you go deeper. At 170 feet, there's a large arch leading to an 85-foot tunnel that diagonally descends through the wall into the open ocean. From there are rapid drops, reaching 2,600 feet. For these deep steps, only technical diving works, as regular air becomes toxic. The rapid descent from the surface might make it easy for divers on regular air to go too deep without realizing it. Nitrogen narcosis becomes too intoxicating, and they may pass out. Interestingly, it's not just divers on regular air who face tragedies there. Speaking of tragedies, this is Tariq Omar. He is a professional technical diver and instructor, affectionately known as the Bone Collector and Gravekeeper. His unconventional titles are linked to his involvement in body recoveries at the infamous Blue Hole in the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt. The Blue Hole is a renowned dive site attracting both novice and expert divers. However, it holds a dark reputation as possibly the deadliest dive spot globally, with estimates of over 130 to 200 lives lost, though the exact number remains uncertain due to the lack of official records. Tariq has been part of the majority, if not all, of the body recoveries since the late 1990s. Despite the numerous cases, he's lost count of the incidents. The first two divers he recovered were Martin Guerra and Connor Oregon in 1997. Martin and Connor, experienced and meticulous divers, traveled from Ireland to Egypt for a year of diving adventures. Their passion for diving was evident as they planned to establish a travel agency specializing in overseas dive tours upon returning to Ireland. In November of that year, during a dive at the Blue Hole with a potty diving organization group, Martin and Connor got separated from the rest. Alone and unintentionally descending too deep for their gas mixture, they lost consciousness, regulators fell out, and they sank to 213 feet. The group realized the situation only when the two failed to return on time. Despite a swift search, Martin and Connor were found too late, adding their names to the tragic stories of the Blue Hole. Similar to other renowned diving destinations, the Blue Hole in Dahab, Egypt, is surrounded by local guides ready to assist adventurers. Normally, these guides offer gear rentals, allowing visitors to equip themselves adequately for their underwater exploration. Moreover, for added safety and guidance, adventurers have the option to hire these local guides who can lead them through the shallower sections of the Blue Hole, ensuring a secure and enjoyable sightseeing experience. But oops, that's not what Yuri Lipsky was after. The fatal tragedy of Yuri Lipsky. On April 28, 2000, Yuri Lipsky, a 22-year-old Russian diving instructor, set out on a journey into the Blue Hole. With a very profound understanding of the challenges posed by deep diving, he was thoroughly prepared for the descent toward the arch. During Yuri Lipsky's final moments on land, witnesses observed that he was fully geared up for diving but lacked two crucial elements: a diving buddy and a second oxygen tank. In outdoor activities like diving, having a companion is recommended due to the isolation and potential unreachability of immediate help, as unforeseen accidents can happen. Despite this recommendation, Yuri Lipsky seemed to believe he could make the descent on his own. According to a local diving instructor and guide, who had seen Yuri a year before his death, Lipsky, like many others, expressed a strong desire to dive the Blue Hole, regardless of experience and certifications. This suggests a possible tendency toward recklessness and overestimation of his diving abilities. Yuri's father had reportedly made him promise not to engage in any stupid things. Upon arriving in Dahab from Russia for a quick vacation, Yuri brought around 80 kilograms, 176 pounds, of gear with him. Although he initially went to Tel Aviv to visit a local, he returned to Dahab, expressing his intention to go diving because it was a beautiful, unique place in the world. Local accounts reveal that Yuri Lipsky spent about 30 to 40 minutes wandering around, seeking an experienced diver to accompany him. Eventually, he found a different guide to go with him. However, Yuri's companion returned 15 to 20 minutes after they began the dive. But Yuri Lipsky never made it back. It was strange, and no one knew where he was. There was a mystery about what had happened to him. So what happened? Sadly, during Yuri's dive, he took a video of his final moments. But before we see what it contains, here is a spoiler. Despite what many people believe, Yuri Lipsky didn't record his own death on video. Those are just spicy rumors. He only filmed the moments right before he died because the video stops before showing his actual passing. The footage kicks off with Yuri near the water's surface, surrounded by fellow divers, coral reefs, and fish in the bright, blue, and clear water. Taking a moment to fiddle with the camera, Yuri seems to attach a lens cover, perhaps to shield it from the anticipated pressure. After satisfying adjustments, his attention shifts to two divers ahead, their regulators creating a string of bubbles as they float, seemingly engaged in conversation. Yuri gets close enough almost to touch them before moving on, gazing into the distance where only dark water is visible, with bubbles indicating other divers at greater depths. Yuri starts moving toward those bubbles. Skipping ahead in the video, Yuri stops fiddling and starts his descent. Refocusing, he directs his gaze toward another diver below, possibly the local guide. The diver emits bubbles and Yuri swims past, looking up to the sunlit surface and then down to what appears to be the bottom. Actually, the inner wall of the hole where the water is noticeably darker. Now, I'm going to do something that I don't normally do. I'll let the video run without commentary, letting you listen to Yuri's breathing as he descends. Now and then, you'll catch a glimpse of the inner wall at the bottom of the frame, but notice how quickly the water turns really dark in just a few moments. Around the 5-minute point, Yuri Lipsky starts screaming. You can hear a beeping sound in the background, signaling trouble as Yuri's breaths become shallower and more rapid. He checks his dive computer for the depth and it shows 81 meters or 265 feet. Regular air isn't recommended below 40 meters, and Yuri is nearly twice as deep. In the next moments, you'll witness him struggling along the bottom of some ledge, and it's uncertain how aware he is of what's happening. There's also the sound of him wrestling with his gear, possibly attempting to release the weight holding him down and float back to the surface, or dealing with convulsions or panic as he removes his regulator. The camera points downward, revealing the desolate ocean floor as Yuri desperately stirs up the sediment, fighting for his life. Abruptly, the video cuts off around the 7-minute mark, leaving a haunting silence. As 40 agonizing minutes crawl by with no sign of Yuri, the harsh truth sinks in. Yuri is never coming back. He is dead. The weight of the situation becomes palpable. His parents get the sad news, and his dad comes to Dahab the next day, facing the tough reality. After pleading with the locals to recover Yuri from the depths, Tarek eventually volunteered for the daunting task of retrieval, marking the deepest recovery anyone had attempted at the time. Yuri was eventually discovered lying face down with excessive weight at a final depth of 91 meters. Tarek also observed that, in an attempt to increase buoyancy, Yuri's buoyancy control device had burst due to being overfilled. In the end, Yuri was brought back up and all his personal belongings, including the camera, were returned to his parents. At the time, Tarek assumed the camera, rated for a depth of 75 meters, had broken, and no footage would have been captured. Unfortunately, as witnessed, it had recorded everything, and the footage was subsequently shown to Yuri's mother and father. Tarek has mentioned that had he known the camera was functional, he would have flooded it himself. Now, I know what you are asking yourself. What really happened to Yuri Lipsky? You might be thinking, oh, it's obvious he drowned to death. However, the diving communities have different opinions on what ultimately caused Yuri Lipsky's death. Many speculate that the 22-year-old met his demise due to oxygen intoxication and nitrogen narcosis, both common causes of death for divers who go too fast and too deep. Oxygen intoxication occurs when a person inhales too much supplemental oxygen, also known as oxygen poisoning. This excess oxygen damages lung tissue and fills the lungs' alveoli with fluid, making it challenging for the lungs to transport oxygen to the bloodstream. The suffocation from within the body impairs the central nervous system, resulting in symptoms such as coughing, dizziness, confusion, and blurred vision. Certainly not the best things to experience when you're several hundred feet from land and have no one else to help you. Another potential factor in Yuri Lipsky's death is nitrogen narcosis. Similar to oxygen poisoning, nitrogen narcosis can impact mental functioning. Scuba divers often encounter this when breathing in compressed air from their tanks. It induces a state resembling drunkenness, affecting neuromuscular function, behavior, and consciousness. Being drunk underwater is far from ideal, especially when you're deep in the sea. Regardless of the cause, it's evident that Yuri Lipsky began losing control. He could have inflated his buoyancy control device, BCD, to ascend, but his mental state might have made it challenging. It's possible that the effects of either oxygen poisoning or nitrogen narcosis were too severe for him to realize he should inflate his BCD. Funny enough, remember when Yuri's father warned him not to do any stupid things? This has kept me thinking, maybe what truly killed Yuri Lipsky may have been overeagerness. I may be wrong, obviously, but both his father and local divers appeared to notice that Yuri Lipsky was excessively enthusiastic about diving into the blue hole. His father, based on his comments, seemed to recognize that Yuri was overly confident. Typically, technical divers bring tanks with gas mixtures to counteract the effects of nitrogen narcosis at considerable depths like those in the blue hole. However, Yuri brought only a single oxygen tank. Some speculate that Yuri Lipsky might have been attempting a bounce dive. According to a 2018 WorkSafe technical bulletin, a bounce dive involves a diver reaching depths shallower than 21 meters with less than 15 minutes of surface intervals between consecutive dives. Engaging in bounce diving carries the risk of decompression sickness, an ailment that affects divers during ascent due to rapidly decreasing pressure in their surroundings. Considering the circumstances surrounding Yuri Lipsky's death and the events leading up to it, the more straightforward explanation is that overconfidence and recklessness were the culprits. Enthralled by the prospect of reaching the blue hole's bottom in Dahab, Yuri Lipsky descended to extreme depths too quickly and did so alone with only one oxygen tank. This happened after he had visited the blue hole only once in the year before his tragic death. While Yuri Lipsky's demise is undoubtedly sorrowful, it serves as a reminder for adventure enthusiasts like us not to overestimate our abilities when facing the powerful forces of nature. Yuri's footage is now utilized as a cautionary tale for new divers, emphasizing the perils of scuba diving. The remarkable aspect of the video is how swiftly events unfold. From the point where the water appears clear and calm, everything is seemingly fine. Just a few moments pass before the surroundings turn pitch black and alien. It's a rapid transition, leaving little time to comprehend what's happening before it's already too late. Perhaps it's for this reason that the blue hole in Dahab is so perilous. The surface conditions create an illusion of a much safer environment than it truly is. Now, have you ever underestimated nature's power in your own adventures? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more captivating stories. All in all, remember that nature's mysteries are best approached with respect and caution. Stay curious, stay safe, and until next time, happy exploring.